Greetings, dear students, and welcome to the orientation to the legal translation module. What I mean by the word orientation is basically putting you on the track towards understanding what legal translation is. Knowing that you are fourth year students and you have had enough experience in the previous 3 years, and not experience, but enough knowledge, since you have gained multiple, since you have studied multiple subjects, which have allowed you to understand concepts and learn vocabularies which can help you with translation. The knowledge that you've gained is of real importance and great importance to legal translation, because as you can see, the phrase is, it's a noun phrase which is made up of two words, legal and translation. In other words, you already know the part with translation, but this time what you'll do is you'll apply the knowledge you have gained in the previous years towards legality, in other words, law, to be familiar with vocabularies that are used in law. Why do I not consider legal translation as a separate form of translation? Because it's only vocabularies. It's only putting legal vocabularies into action, into translation, I mean. The following slide talks about how the module will be organized, how the module will have the organization. In other words, how I'll basically lead the module, and how I'll be. In other words, I'm talking about how the module will be organized, the organization of the module. As you can see in this PowerPoint presentation, I will give a very brief introduction of the module, the subject. Then I will talk about aims of the module. What are the things that we are after when we are taking this module? The contents, which is of vital importance. Assignments, evaluation methods. How am I going to evaluate students? What are the means of assessment that I'll utilize to assess the student's performance and knowledge? Resources. Resources is about the kind of books, pamphlets, handouts, anything which is of use to the students. I'll put it up maybe on Moodle, which is the platform used for education at Nowruz University. And then finally, although this is difficult to do this because this is a recorded online lecture or recorded electronic lecture, it's difficult for you to ask questions. Anyway, so what is legal translation? I think I spoke about legal translation a while ago. I said it's basically the translation of legal terms and terminologies and phrases and anything that happens in the context and the setting of law. Legal translation is sometimes described as the most difficult form of translation, and that's to a large extent correct. To a whole extent is actually correct. There are two types of translation. This is my personal opinion, by the way. There are two types of translation which are extremely difficult. One is literary translation, and second, which is even more difficult than literary translation, is legal translation. And that's because legal translation is having knowledge of law. If you're not familiar with legal vocabularies, then it's extremely difficult for you to translate something correctly. I remember when I was a student, I think a third year student, fourth year, I don't remember exactly when it was, but I had to translate something that wasn't specifically legal, but it touched upon topics that were related to law. And believe it or not, it was a hefty duty. It was a difficult job. It wasn't easy. So this is why people believe, and I think to a large extent that's actually correct, legal translation is considered to be one of the most difficult forms of translation. Yeah, so I think that's pretty much what legal translation is. I mean, it's too vast. You cannot really describe what legal translation is in in a short time. But I can tell you it's a difficult form of translation, and it's the translation of legal vocabularies and legal terminologies. So, what are the aims of this module? What are the aims, the goals of this um, subject, legal translation? First of all, is making students familiar with the legal documents. This is because most of the time when translators perform translation, they translate they translate documents, legal documents, like maybe citizenships, maybe certificates, college certificates, maybe food ration, what you call it, the food ration certificate. Those sorts of documents are translated. So one of the things, the aims of this module is to familiarize students with the legal documents that are out there. Two is making students become acquainted with the legal vocabularies and expressions. Now, legal translation, when we say legal translation, legal vocabularies, you cannot express something, you cannot translate something legal, I mean, unless you have the equivalent vocabularies in Arabic or Kurdish or vice versa. Case in point, let me think of something um, very simple. Let's say we have a unilateral contract. Unilateral. I think this is simple, but again, if you look at a word that is equivalent in Kurdish, would be هفستك إكلايانا, and in Arabic would be عقد من طرف واحد, or you can say عقد. I forgot the word. Anyways, so um, إذعان, I guess. عقد إذعان, yes. عقد إذعان is the vocabulary. So what I mean here, the implications are, if you're not familiar with the vocabularies, you cannot translate it. You cannot translate unilateral contract to something like, um, let's say, هفستك کشلای کسی که وبتنی هاتیه امضا کردن آنجا شلای کسی که وبتنی هاتیه نویسین. You cannot do that because that's giving an explanation to the vocabulary. It's fine if you're translating it to, let's say, a friend of yours, or someone asks you to translate something and you translate it, that's perfectly fine. But when you are addressing, or when you're dealing with governmental directorates and government, or the government basically, you need to use formal language of the government. You need to use the language that the government understands. So this is why it's important to familiarize students with legal vocabularies. Next is the practice translation of legal documents. Great. So I'll give you documents, and together we'll practice the translation of those legal documents. Furthermore, which is the following point, we'll learn the duties of a legal translator. What are the duties? What are the responsibilities of a legal translator? What are the do's and don'ts of a legal translator? What are the um, rights of a legal translator. What can a legal translator do, and what can he or she not do? These are some of the things that we'll learn as the module follows, hopefully, because you don't know what'll happen. Next is the areas where legal translators perform. What are the sectors? What are the areas, the domains in which the legal translators perform? That's another thing that we learn. Next is the careers and job opportunities of legal translators. What are the jobs? What can you do after you graduate as a legal translator? What can you do with a legal translation or knowledge in legal translation? What can you do with that? And believe it or not, just a hint, most of the people who earn money through translation are either simultaneous or consecutive interpreters or legal translators because they translate legal documents. Again, I'm saying this from experience. I don't know if that's really the case, but from my experience, I've been with legal translators and I've been with interpreters. Those are the most like careers. Sorry, those are the careers that make most of the money. So I'm pretty sure from experience that the opportunities you have as a legal translator are really immense. You have a lot of opportunities. And finally, we'll learn hopefully a lot of things if we don't have any issues as the year proceeds. So, what about the content of the module? These are some of the things that we'll have throughout the module. First of all, we'll maybe before this even, I don't know, maybe I'll give you some other documents before these that are included in this slide. But first, we'll start with general documents, like rudimentary documents, documents that are everywhere, and documents that most of the people deal with, like citizenship, residency card, driving license, and I think I mentioned earlier about food ration. What is it? It's like a list, yeah. It's like a food ration plate, or food ration receipt. Yes, food ration receipt. That was the word which I missed. I've forgotten to say a while ago. The next thing that we'll translate or perform the legal translation for will be certificates. When I say certificates, I don't mean like a college certificate. Well, that's also included, but that's not what is meant here. When we say certificates, it's like, let's say someone is born, yeah, they get a birth certificate. If someone passes away, yeah, they get a death certificate. If you want to show another company that you're working for some sort of company, then you need a certificate, and it certifies that you're working for this company, and so on. So that's what I mean by a certificate. Next are receipts, like bank receipts or maybe a general receipt that you get when, let's say, you buy something, any form of receipt. And mostly when we talk about receipt or receipts, we mean things that are related to money, things that are related to buying and selling. So those will also be hopefully some of the documents that we'll learn how to translate. Next is the notary public documents. One of the most important document that some of the most important documents are the notary public documents, because these documents um, are used a lot in court, and also they're used when, say, you want to travel to another country and you want to give your property to someone else, or let's say you move to another country and you want to sell your property after you've left the country. So what you do is you ask someone else whom you've given complete power of authority to sell the property. You're not there, but the person whom you've given this sort of document has the right to do that on behalf of yourself. So who can do that? Who can give this sort of authority to a lawyer or to another person? Is the notary public. So that's why notary public documents are of importance. Next is the Islamic court documents, the documents that are used in the Islamic court. Why I've described it as Islamic court is because there are some of the documents that are just civil. Um, while in fact, the thing is, while in Iraq, most of the courts are Islamic, but still some of the documents that you have in Iraqi courts are just civil ones, not related to religion. So this is why I've termed this, or I've described this, these sorts of documents. I've described these documents as Islamic court documents. Next are the civil judicial documents. Before I talk about civil judicial documents, Islamic court documents are documents like marriage documents. Yeah, sorry, marriage contract, or maybe let's say a divorce contract. Sorry, not a contract, a divorce document. Yeah, because it's not a contract anymore. Contract is between two people and more. Anything that is related to Islamic law. So those are some of the documents that we'll learn how to translate. Next is the civil judicial documents. These are pertaining to earning a citizenship, um, applying for residency. These are some of the things about civil judicial documents, and also sometimes criminal records. Yeah, so civil judicial documents are documents pertaining to, let's say, crimes, or pertaining to reports, and it's just related to civil cases. That's what civil judicial documents are about. Next is a civil status document. This is things like applying for a residency, or renewing, let's say, your citizenship. It's these sorts of documents. Um, Finally, forget about the miscellaneous part. Contracts. Contracts are also the documents which is a form of agreement between two parties, two people, and more on certain terms. And translation of those contracts is also important for us to learn and to grasp. And maybe finally, after we finish with all these documents, hopefully throughout the year, we'll learn also some miscellaneous, or sorry, we'll try to learn about the translation or of miscellaneous documents, other documents that are also sometimes require some form of legal translation. As you can see, I have a note at the bottom. I say that this is not the order that they'll be taught. What I mean here is maybe I'll skip some of them and then return back later in the future. So they don't have to be in this order. Maybe I'll start, let's say, with notary public documents right from the beginning, which is outrageous and it's extreme. But just to give you an example of what I mean by that, this sort of the order that I've put here in this slide doesn't mean that I'll be following it, right? So please bear that in mind. Assignments. It's really, I cannot stress this, but students have to complete two assignments. One of the assignments is a contract. So I give the students a contract, and it's every student on their own. It's not like groups. Every student get a contract, and they'll have to translate the contract by the 12th of November 2020. Okay, so the students have to do that. That's the first assignment. The second one is translation of a legal document. I'm going to give you a sort of a legal document. I'll ask you to translate it. The deadline will be the 27th of December this year. As you can see at the bottom, it says, right there, it says both assignments carry marks which will be added to the final grade. So that's the final mark. You know the 10 that you have Yeah, 10 out of 10. Like, I think it's mostly given via quizzes. Like, students get these grades, which are from the final grade, from quizzes. The teacher performs two quizzes, I think, before the mid-year exam and then after the mid-year exam, and then those two quizzes are um, added to one another and then added to the final grade. What I'll do is quizzes are very important, and I'm not saying that I will not do any quizzes. I will do quizzes, and I'm not saying, again, I stress this. I'm not saying that I'll not do or I will not be doing quizzes. I will be doing quizzes, but these are really important. Assignments are also extremely important because it's via these assignments that um, we can progress. We can learn vocabularies. We can practice what we have learned in the classroom, hopefully. Another note here, which says right at the bottom, that translated documents will have to be submitted to the following email. I'm not sure about this. Maybe I'll ask you to submit it on or submit it to the Moodle platform. I think there's uh, a section where you can post any assignments you have on the Moodle account. Let's go to the next slide, which is evaluation. How am I going to evaluate students? What are the means on which I'm going to use? What are the means that I'll be utilizing to evaluate students? First is classroom participation. Do you attend the classroom? Do you attend the classes? Well, that's including online classes and also electronic classes, because I think there is somewhere that the teacher can see who has viewed the document and who's downloaded it and who's, yeah, these sorts of things. So classroom participation is very important. Assignments. Well, I told you before that these assignments carry marks which will be added to the final grade. So I think it's wise of you to do these assignments, otherwise you'll be losing grades and marks. Activities, maybe throughout the year, unless coronavirus gets worse. Suddenly, it gets worse. Maybe activities will be less, but there are some plans that activities will be conducted if we don't have any problems. Oral quizzes. Oral quizzes are just basically are just me asking questions in the classroom as we deal with legal documents. Next are pop quizzes. What I mean by pop quizzes are quizzes where I ask the students to pull out a piece of paper, write their names on it, and then answer a question, or maybe I give them a document to translate. And another already already familiar mean of evaluation are the mid-year exam and the final or the end of year exams. These are also some of the ways in which evaluation will be performed. Resources, the books and handouts. I'll be giving you all documents, everything you need, starting from citizenships, from contracts, from certificates, all sorts of documents. However, it's important that you remember we're dealing with legal documents, and we're dealing with, or we're in the law domain, legal domain. Some of the documents are sensitive and require some attention as these documents are used in the class, because the release or the releasing, sorry, the release of these documents entails the person who has released those documents, to legal responsibilities, and we don't want to get into any trouble because of this module. We don't want to have any problems with the law. We need something that we can learn from but not have any issues with. So please bear in mind that I'll not give you documents that could potentially cause you or me legal responsibility. We'll be using them in the class, but we'll make sure that we'll not have any sort of archive of those documents because they're sensitive documents. Okay, so that's important. If you had any questions about that, maybe we can discuss it in the classroom. This is where you're supposed to ask questions, and I answer those questions. But unfortunately, I will leave this part to the day on which we meet, and then if you had any questions about what you've seen in this introductory or orientation presentation, the presentation about the orientation to this module, you can ask me later, and hopefully I'll try to find an answer or answer the questions that you have provided. Sorry. I'll try to answer the questions you have raised. If you have any questions, you can email me via the email that I've given you. You can send me an email via the email, or you can send an email to the email that I've posted or put in this presentation, and I'll happily answer any questions you have. Thank you very much for being attentive, and I'm so sorry to have taken so much of your precious time. Stay safe and see you very soon. Goodbye.